Hey,
Hi,
I'm Alex,
I'm Val.
and today we are going to talk about the Telltale Moozadell, 9th episode of season 3 of The Sopranos.
Yes, this is about The Sopranos, by the way.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Sopranos this time.
Okay.
Like all of the times.
Yeah.
Something cool about this episode is it's another one written by Michael Imperioli, who plays Christopher in the show, who actually is a pretty incredible writer and actually shows up writing some of the great episodes of the show in addition to his acting work, which is really cool. And I feel like it's an interesting episode. I feel like now we're maybe like moving into the latter part of this season. They're definitely setting up some dramatic possibilities between the characters that will kind of continue to unfold as the season reaches its end.
Right.
And I feel like we're moving out of these like groupings of episodes that happened earlier, like the kind of like trilogy of violent episodes that were somewhat kind of standalone, and then kind of like the slower paced episodes that came after that. I feel like we're kind of moving into kind of establishing some of the key players in the end of the season, focusing on characters who have been introduced more thoroughly in this season, like Gloria and to an extent Jackie Jr. Even though we had seen him before, he's kind of coming into his own as like a full character now.
Yeah, it's interesting, like going towards the end of the season, because, you know, especially during that trilogy of violent episodes, for example, and even before that, we were kind of set up to feel like Ralphie was kind of our villain of the season, right? But then he's played like a really minor role these past episodes, right? Like this episode, we see him wearing an apron and cooking pasta and like talking about
and giving Jackie a gun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But like it seems like that conflict, right? Like him being made captain, it kind of seems like that conflict has been cooled off.
Right.
So we are kind of left now being like, okay, like what is the conflict of this season then? Or like, was that it? Has it already been resolved?
Yeah, and I think they're even playing within this episode a feeling of things are resolving and actually are relatively good. Like Tony's happy when he goes to Melfi. He's giving her a bonus because he feels like things are going well in his life. He's
whistling as he walks out the door, like he used to say about those happy wanderer types who just like whistle as they walk down the street.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, all things considered, actually, there's actually some major like anticlimaxes like the show loves in this episode. Like it sets up a major conflict with AJ that could really like affect the trajectory of his life. He could be facing expulsion, and yet it's just kind of resolved with a whimper, with nothing. Yeah. In fact, it's almost like the opposite of the principles that you would expect for a situation like that. Like there's just this kind of like bullshit pretense so that he can play football.
Right. And even with the Jackie Jr. and like the Matouche scenario, right? Like that does blow up. Like Matouche gets really badly hurt, right? But it's still not like, I don't know how, like we kind of see it's like, I don't know, Jackie Jr.'s asserting himself in a different way. He's kind of like on the rise. He's acting like a total boss.
Jackie.
He's trying to be seen that way anyways, which is pretty funny to me.
Yeah, and it's going pretty badly.
Yeah, it's not going well for him.
He's not
But
great
for the other
at it.
characters, things seem to be, kind of like working themselves out.
Yeah. And I mean, with Jackie too, like, I feel like it's an interesting dynamic because he comes from this kind of like royal family. And yet I feel like he's a character who, even though he kind of wants this now, he's kind of unprepared for that world. And I think that it's almost a reflection of the generation he's from. Like, I feel like Jackie and who he is with his upbringing and who he is, he just kind of cannot function within this mob world. Like he's kind of come a little bit too late. Like he's, I don't know, maybe he's like kind of come in after the end or something. That he's kind of connected to Meadow in a way where he's unconnected to the characters, even like Christopher. Yeah. Who is not that much older than him.
Exactly.
But kind of comes from a different world and is more prepared to live within the kind of mob universe.
Yeah.
And I think that he's trying to force it, but it just like, it doesn't work.
Yeah, he's even more like connected to AJ than he is to any of those other guys, right?
Yeah,
and like
exactly.
it was interesting, like them spending time together this episode is interesting in light of like AJ being destructive and Jackie Jr. also being, you know, relatively destructive or like heading towards destruction maybe anyways, right? So yeah, I think there's some parallels there. And I agree. Like he doesn't, that scene where he's like meeting with like the friends of Matouche, whoever those guys are.
Yeah.
Like it's like even just the way he's conducting himself, it's like he's like watching a TV show about how to be a boss.
Right.
Like he doesn't, even though his dad was the boss, he didn't have access to that or something like that. Like he's like acting like a TV mob boss.
Yeah, and he's definitely projecting like a strong image. Like there's something that he has in his head of who he wants to be. Yeah. And it's very detached from who he actually is.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting too, like the way that they portray Jackie in this episode, it is kind of multidimensional. Like I feel like he at this part of the season is now kind of joining the like key ensemble, like the key part of the cast of characters, and they
even though they still have him as not like a main, they're like also starring whoever the actor's name is.
Right, but I mean he's just kind of becoming central to everything that's happening. And I think that that's kind of reflected in the way that they represent him as a complicated, complex character. And we even have like, there's a shot when he's with AJ helping him with football. They actually have like a spinning shot similar to the one that they had that was originally established with Tony in college and has been used with other characters. And it's actually kind of showing this like mellow side of him. Meadow is looking at him through the window, kind of like, she's like kind of like pining for him. And he kind of comes across as having this kind of emotional, kind of helpful, thoughtful, caring side to him. And yet, obviously, at the same time, it's complicated by the fact that he's trying to be more involved with the mob.
Right. Even when, like, you know, like the first we see of him in this episode, right? They're about to sing "Happy Birthday" to Carmela, and everyone's gathered around, and like they jump into singing, and then the doorbell rings right away, and Meadow goes to get it. He arrives with like a very large bottle of wine.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was like a Magnum size.
Yeah, which seems like the kind of wine that you get like at the bodega.
Yeah, which I think plays into the theme that's established in this episode of people giving really bad presents or self-serving presents in this episode.
But it is like he always like, you know, all the characters are kind of dealing with how he's in their lives now. Like Tony and Carmela are both dealing with that, you know, and like Rosalie's dealing with that as well, right? So they're both kind of confronted with conflicting feelings about how Jackie Jr. is involved in Meadow's life and what that means. Yeah. Meadow's kind of, you know, like when she's looking at him out the window all dreamily, you know, we can see that she's thinking about that. So he's interesting. I mean, like he does he felt out of place at that party, right? Yeah. Because it's not like Rosalie and Ralphie were there, right? And like Rosalie's Carmela's friend.
Right.
He was there as Meadow's partner.
Right.
Right.
And yet the Jackie that we're seeing in that environment is an act. Like he's manipulating people to see him a certain way when actually underneath he's very different and has different desires and a different idea of who he wants to be.
Yeah.
So it really is pretty insincere.
Yeah.
And even like that wine that he brings, like it's a nice thought, but it's also like pretty easy to see through. And also it's not that fitting for Carmela either.
No. Oh man. Oh, I wanted to mention too when he meets then later with Matouche in the car, like after he talks to Christopher very unsuccessfully and runs out of the Bing. He says really silly things like, "In time, everything will be revealed to you." Like he's such a dweeb, but he can't even write a paper on Edgar Allan Poe, right? Like Meadow has to do that for him. He wants to come off as this smart dude. But I don't think he really is. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was really
And
funny.
also the fact that he turns to Matouche and basically says everything is okay, and then flips it to say you can't serve in the club, but like that is drastically unfair to Matouche because that is clearly not what happened in his interaction with Chris, and he's completely just serving himself in a pretty unintelligent way, in a way that
seem to care
either.
Like
pretty clearly going to blow up for definitely Matouche, but probably him as well.
Yeah.
Like he's really playing with fire.
Yeah.
I mean, Tony has told him not to get involved with this world, and he can't help himself.
Yeah. And he's lying about it, right? He's like, "Oh, I was at a bachelor party, and
that's
why
actually
I'm
kind of
here,
what he's
and...
best at, is that
Yeah.
level of insincerity. Like
Yeah.
he can kind of like come up with stories on the spot, and they're somewhat believable.
Yeah.
But other than that aspect, he doesn't really fit into that world.
Yeah. No, totally.
And he doesn't really seem to have the abilities and that he would need to successfully be a part of that family.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about AJ? Maybe that's a good segue into the stuff that's
Yeah.
happening with him.
Oh, AJ.
Well, let's start with his beautiful present to Carmela of The Matrix.
Yeah. Any deeper meaning you can describe to that?
That he's a dum-dum.
I feel like that's a gift that you would have given your mom.
No, I think I knew better than that.
I don't know, like maybe slightly. I think you would have wrapped something in a plastic bag.
I probably did wrap things in plastic bags. I probably didn't say that I was doing it for the environment. Maybe I did. I don't know. Who knows?
I don't know. It just
entirely
kind of like,
possible.
it felt like you.
When you saw that, it reminded you of me. Oh, that's
It
great.
did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy,
Not
AJ.
now, but like,
Okay.
15 years ago or so.
Right. Cool. Sweet.
Yeah.
Success.
And then of course we see him leave, right? He gets this text message, right? So he's also quite good at lying.
Mm-hmm.
Not a text message. He gets a page on his pager from whoever, and then he asks if he can go and sleep over at whoever, as long as he's in bed, right? But then we see that he actually goes to a pool with Lady Gaga.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So for those who don't know, one of the extras in the scene at the pool is none other than Lady Gaga.
Yeah, so he should, people would have appreciated it if they had known that. He would have been like, hey, I'm going to the school pool with Lady Gaga. They would have been like, that's cool.
Right,
But-
exactly.
Anyways, but instead they just like threw a bunch of stuff into the pool.
Right.
Ordered what looks like a pretty good pizza.
I
And
know.
they didn't even
I was
finish
disappointed
it.
that they didn't finish it. That was
Yeah.
probably my biggest upset.
It sounded
of the
good.
episode.
Double meatballs.
That's an incredible order.
Yeah.
DJ has so much promise.
Yeah, well, I love that line, right? When the police then go to the pizza shop, right, to like
Right.
deduce what
Right.
happened.
It's
They're
such
like,
a mockery too.
Yeah, they're like, does this pie fit a pattern?
Yeah.
That's what they say.
Yeah, I feel like that entire scene is just like kind of supposed to be tongue in cheek. Even like the stereotype of an Italian American who comes up and he's like, I'm going to put my foot up his ass.
Yeah.
And then the younger guy comes. It's just like a caricature of a scene.
Yeah, my pizza never hurt nobody.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then they say to the son, like, this makes you an accessory after
Right.
the fact. Or
And then it
whatever.
zooms in on him, and then it zooms out of AJ's face. That's actually
Right.
how they do the edit. So they're
Yeah.
like connecting them in this interesting way.
Yeah.
I actually thought that next scene was really interesting. So exactly that scene zooms in on him when he realizes he would be an accessory. Zoom out on AJ, and now we're established with AJ, Tony, and
Right,
Carmela.
he's like shown up back from school.
But there's actually for me something very sincere about what AJ's saying there, and I actually think that in a weird way, it's actually like some of the most honest behavior we've seen from him. And it's kind of nothingness, but I think that's kind of who he is as a character.
Yeah.
Like when he's saying, we just did it, and they ask him why he did it, and he says, I don't know. There's something about it that's childish, but also like this kind of like weird nihilistic streak where he just doesn't care
Yeah.
or think about things.
Yeah.
He just kind of behaves and does things. That is youthful, but it's also something else where there's just kind of this like, I don't know, this lack of caring about it.
Yeah.
And I actually think that like they use an extreme close up on his face, which they typically use in this show to convey like an important scene, often about like something deeper about a character. And I think that is something deeper about his character.
Yeah.
He just doesn't know or care.
Yeah.
There's kind of an emptiness.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because like when they're then later in the principal's office, they like keep referring to how AJ is like a leader, right? He's really not, right? Like
No.
in that scenario,
Right.
like he was not leading anything. Like, I guess he ordered the pizza, like like that's.
That's the kind of leader I would follow to the end of the world.
I mean, yeah, and I mean, again, it kind of ties into Jackie Jr. also, right? Like that's that kind of counterpart there, but. He's not like he was just going along like he didn't initiate any of the things that were going on there. He just kind of was watching and laughing, just like Lady Gaga.
Yeah. Right, just like Lady Gaga.
Yeah.
And actually, weirdly, we found out while reading our favorite Sopranos autopsy that Robert Eiler, actually within 3 months of this episode, was arrested for some pretty strange
like robbery,
robbery and assault of some Brazilian tourists.
Yeah, I know.
So that's pretty strange. A little factoid.
It's like I always think about that with actors, like especially young actors, and like this is total aside, but like it must be really hard for young actors. Like he's still a teenager. He's underage. Meadow, even though she was playing a teenager, was never a teenager on the show. But it must be really hard when you immerse yourself in a role, right? And then you're still dealing with like your developing identity as an adult. Like that must be really challenging for, I think, like actors in general, but maybe particularly.
Well, so you think those Brazilians got robbed because of the Sopranos?
No, I'm not saying that. It's just interesting.
Right. No, it is. Absolutely. Yeah, it's something to think about.
I like how Tony with AJ then, like in that, when we zoom in on his face there, Tony keeps saying, "On your mother's birthday."
Right.
And he's like, it was after midnight. But then Tony brings up, like, he's like, "You're screwing everything up. Your football career is going down the drain." Right? Yeah. And so, again, we haven't tapped into Tony's football career entirely yet.
But we've certainly mentioned it on this show.
Yeah.
And to look out for, the mentions.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that kind of like swims around in his subconscious and just kind of bubbles up sometimes.
Well, it's interesting the things he focuses on, right? Like he focuses on something to do with AJ's mother, right? With Carmela.
Yeah.
And he focuses on the football.
Yeah.
He doesn't focus on the other issues that are at play there, right? He doesn't focus on like screwing up your academic career.
Right.
Right? Like, which is probably the clearest issue there.
Right. Yeah. Well, he's doing great. He brought his average up to a C-.
I love that scene. I love when AJ smiles after he hears that. It's so funny. It's so good.
Yeah. And I mean, we have gotten a window into already that like junior varsity football was important for Tony. And that, it's interesting that he focuses on that, and that it's something that for him was very relevant in his youth, is that like he didn't have the football career that he wanted. So again, there's this kind of like selfish aspect to what people tend to focus on, because like Tony can understand it and it affects him. Yeah. And so he's kind of like asserting that onto his son.
Yeah. Totally.
Anything else with AJ?
Not that I have written down. I mean, we do see, like, like he does eventually get this punishment, right, from Tony and Carmela, and the episode ends with him cleaning out the gutters.
Yeah.
They both are, well, Carmela doesn't really acknowledge it, but we know that she's probably the one who told him, like, go outside and clean the gutters. Tony's kind of content with that, right? Like,
yeah.
So, I don't know, like, where,
although, actually, doesn't it kind of look like when they're talking about it and AJ says he just doesn't understand, and then Tony kind of brings him outside as if to show him
gutters.
What the gutters are?
Yeah, but like, that's a few, like, days or whatever, or before the scene where he's actually doing it, right? So, yeah, I don't know, like, for AJ's kind of trajectory, where this is kind of setting him off on.
Well, it does kind of make you ask the question of, who is he? And for me, the only answer that I got kind of updated from this episode is that he is this kind of like empty, kind of like aimless character.
Yeah, well, he's really like shapeable by the other people around him, right? Like, even like, the one thing, like we were talking about Jackie Jr. again, like I kind of like was happy to see like their interaction, like even though I think Jackie Jr.'s kind of a piece of shit.
Yeah.
It did seem like AJ was, influenced in a positive way by him, right? Like he was giving him good advice for football. It wasn't,
right.
AJ like sees him as like, someone who he can aspire to in some ways. I mean, he doesn't know all the ins and outs of what Jackie Jr.'s up to, but that was kind of one of the more, I don't know, positive moments in the show for AJ, but he's moldable to whoever's around him, right? So like when he's with his friends at the pool, he's also like just being a little shit. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting in that scene at the school at Verbum Day, with the football coach who's there, is the fact that he's also a priest. That for me kind of like likened him to Father Phil.
Yeah. There's
this kind of like empty rhetoric that they're using, and they're kind of like protecting principles, and yet at the end of the day, it's that's what it is. It's empty.
Yeah.
And like when the headmaster or principal or whatever is referencing the Harvard study. Like they can kind of like talk these words that sound good and maybe like with words kind of convey principles, but in action they don't.
Yeah.
It's actually quite the opposite. Like it's self-serving. They just want to win their football game. So there's really nothing about principles or morality in that scene.
Well, and we get other references to other religions too in this episode, right? Like, so we have, and maybe we can jump into talking about her, but we have the introduction of, well, we met Gloria a couple.
The development of Gloria.
We have a development of Gloria, yes. And we get a little bit of insight into her, that she wears this Buddhist symbol, which again, like ties her to Janice, right? And Tony even mentions that. He's like, oh no, I knew there was something wrong with you, right? And she talks about how she meditates in the morning and it like sets her up for, I forget how she says it, like a positive outlook on the day or something like that.
Right.
When clearly she's like a pretty troubled person who I don't think really has a positive outlook on the day or life. And then we have Tony kind of starting to absorb. He uses the same words that she does, and I forget what they are at this very moment. Shoot.
At which point?
When he's in with Melfi, he uses, and she comments on it. She's like, your words seem to come from a really Eastern philosophy.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I know.
Shoot, I wish I could remember what they were.
It's okay.
But so we have references to that. Of course, like when, Janice, we had her exploring Buddhism also, like that was always
Well, even with Janice too, like she's now exploring Catholicism,
Right.
and yet her friend is there saying like, oh, the Lord says we can't drink, and Janice shows up with cocaine on her nose.
Yeah.
So clearly, again, there's this like hypocrisy to taking the words of something to prove principles and morality, but then just immediately bending it and doing whatever you want.
Yeah, no, exactly. So we have Gloria, right? Tony, seeks her out after their last encounter, right? Or I don't know, I guess it's after their last encounter. I don't know if they've seen each other in between. But he goes to her place of work. He sees her with this, like, kind of being very friendly with this other guy who buys cars from her. And later when they end up going to the zoo, right? He buys her that Louis Vuitton wallet. They later go to the zoo. He says, I've never met anybody like you. And I thought that was such a funny thing to say. Because she had, like I mentioned with the Janice thing, like she has overlaps with so many other characters.
Oh my God, yeah.
And we see that when she says to him, poor you, right? And
the
we
acting
see
on James Gandolfini's face there
face.
is incredible.
I know. It's amazing. She's very much like people that he's met before.
I think she's like a mirror. I think she's like a complete
manipulative.
reflection of
She enjoys violence, right? Like even like think about when when Janice and Richie were having sex and he was holding a gun to her head, right? And then like she's like fondling his gun. She's a lot like lots of people that he's met before.
Even like in the session that she has with Melfi too, and they kind of have that like showdown. And Melfi's astute enough to know that something's going on, and she asks her. The behavior that Gloria exhibits there, like she turns
turning
it. Turning it on Melfi and saying that she's kind of like indignant about the way that this went, and it's like it's so similar to what Tony has done, not only in Melfi's sessions but just like his behavior.
Well, and also what Livia did all the time, right? Livia was the queen of that. So yeah, I think like that was just one of the funnier lines. Like I've never met anyone like you. And when you see them, like they do seem to have this like very intense connection, right? Like
which makes sense because they reflect each other.
Yeah, because they're both insane. But yeah, I don't know. Like her character functions in a similar way to some of those other characters, and it really just I think like it's kind of like. Again, with AJ, like getting himself involved in these shenanigans over and over again, it's kind of like that you can never really escape these things that are innate to yourself, right? Like, even though you think you are, like...
I definitely think that's a core message of this show.
Yeah, like with AJ, like you think he's a leader on the football team and is doing better in school, but really he's just the same old. With Tony, like... he's no longer with Irina or whatever, but like, there's also similarities with Gloria and Irina, this like neediness, the way that they, like give him kind of this power that he really
Yeah.
craves and wants. Yeah, you just never kind of escape that, even though it might look like it at some point on the outside.
Yeah, the people on the show don't really change.
No.
That is definitely a central part of The Sopranos. There are some really interesting things with Gloria, actually, I found in their later scene in the episode. So when they're at the hotel room in New York, when they're dancing, the camera work is like constantly spinning. So it's very disorienting. It's actually almost like intoxicated. So I feel like it's like we're meant to kind of like be put off by this relationship, and it actually kind of like makes it feel topsy-turvy and unsettled. And there was a couple like really interesting things that happened too in terms of the power dynamic between both of them. Like Gloria holding the gun, just in terms of, I mean, first of all, like that kind of representing kind of like a power control, you know, of her having that.
But she's also like between his legs.
Right. But that's also like sexually she's in control. Like she is like the one who is asserting herself. I don't know. I mean, she's in command of that situation.
Totally.
She's doing what she wants. And actually that comes to my point, because there's a few things. Like she's aware of what Tony does when she sees the gun. Like she knows, Mr. Waste Management. Yeah. Like she knows who he is, and that's actually a power that a lot of other people don't have. Like Carmela doesn't have that. She kind of like puts her head in the sand. Yeah. And kind of like doesn't acknowledge who Tony really is. Yeah. So she's fully aware, and she's fully in control of this situation. Like she kind of like pushes him down. She's the one with the power dynamic. What's really interesting is that the last scene that happens in that entire kind of scene between them is that Tony's looking like a little bit concerned and like kind of tries to flip the dynamic. So he actually kind of like turn her so she's the one on the chair. Yeah. And that he would be asserting himself. And actually that's when they edit. Yeah. Like they get out of there. Yeah, yeah. So like Gloria has this control over Tony and actually like a level of power over him that we don't often see in this show. Typically Tony is the one who has power over others.
Yeah, no, totally. I wrote something down during that scene too, which is when she is saying like the Mr. Waste Management thing. She says, "I know why you lie, but you don't have to." And I thought that was really interesting, because I don't know if there's anyone else in Tony's life that he doesn't have to lie to. Right? Like, right. There's no one who's really like said that to him or like made him feel that way.
Maybe in his family. I mean, like in the mob family. I don't know if he needs to be dishonest with a lot of those people.
I mean, he is about his therapy and stuff like that at some points, right? Like he does hide parts of himself from
or he did.
them.
I mean, I guess he came
yeah.
clean. But in general, yeah. I mean, he creates a cage for himself through his behavior.
And then just in terms of kind of that like intoxicated kind of disorientation, like Tony is spending like a crazy person in this episode.
It's
like
wild.
He is really out of control. I don't know how much money he would have spent in this episode, but
how much would that ring be?
I have no idea.
Neither do I.
I have zero concept of that. So there is this kind of like, again, it's this pattern of like like AJ, like not looking before you leap, like being kind of careless with, you know, everything and just like, you know, following your most like base instincts, I guess, towards, I don't know what kind of end. Yeah. But yeah, I don't like, but I agree with you on the power dynamic thing. Like she's like all the others who have come before her in her, you know, lineage, she's able to manipulate Tony, even though he still has some semblance that he's in control. Yeah. Like even when he comes and he's like, "I want you to come with me. We'll go anywhere." She's like, "I'll call you. Yeah. We'll go to the zoo." Right. And I think and that's why I think he likes her so much. Right. Like, it is this kind of like, it's familiar. It makes him feel like he's chasing her and stuff like that. Right. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, totally.
And then of course we have her with a lot of snakes.
There's a lot of her with snakes. Yeah,
like
definitely.
When they're at the reptile room at the zoo, there's that big snake behind her.
There sure is. Yeah, that's a pretty overt one.
Yeah.
There's also like, I think it's when there's a scene, there's a scene with Gloria and Tony, and then there's an edit immediately to Polly and Tony talking about snakes. And
it's when they're at the car dealership, and then they're talking about snakes.
Yeah. And so they kind of like link those things
Yeah.
at first. And actually on the TV you can like see all the snakes.
Right.
So there's a lot of like visual
Well, and they
association.
talk about snakes for a long
Yeah.
time, right? And there's these interesting references, like they talk about how they're male and female, and so
Right.
they can fuck themselves,
Right.
which is not true. But but then there's this reference to religion too, right? Like Tony makes this reference, like, why would you call someone a snake, right? Like that's why you call them a snake. You can't trust them because
Right.
they can fuck themselves.
Right.
And Tony's like, well, doesn't it reference like Adam and Eve and the apple? And Polly's like, snakes were fucking themselves long before Adam and Eve, which
Great
is
contribution to the episode by Polly.
yeah, but it is, again, like in light of the other references to religion that we see, and also in reference to Gloria, like I think both of those things might be relevant to her as a character, right?
Yeah.
Like we won't get too much into it until later episodes, but she isn't maybe serving her best interests. Like she is kind of fucking herself, and we get that sense
Yeah.
from her session with Melfi, right? That
Yeah.
she has this history with men,
Yeah.
and she's diving into something new and lying to Melfi about it,
Yeah.
right? Even though that was the cause of her harming herself in her past relationship. But at the same time, she is also this kind of temptress, right? Like the snake with Eve, right? Like she's holding out this juicy apple or whatever it is in the story. So it's an apple. But yeah, I think those are both like, however we want to look at snakes, both of those are kind of true to her.
Yeah.
And then we also, and I think in Sopranos Autopsy, he mentions that too, like the connection with Janice to reptiles, right?
Right,
Like
which
we
is made a lot in the second
and
season.
snakes. I mean,
Yeah.
like we
Cobra when she's doing
see.
that in
Yeah,
the
and we've
yoga
talked
class,
about that
the
before.
Creepy crawler.
Yeah, the creepy crawler pool thing. So again, like showing that overlap between those
Yep.
two characters, right?
Yeah. No, totally. I thought another interesting scene was Tony with Melfi near the end of the episode where
Yeah.
he's like so happy and saying that and Melfi like picks up on that, saying that, oh wow, you're really happy. And yet she is astute enough in the end to know exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
I liked how Tony was saying like, it's because you've put a lot of time into me. So again, like this like glaring hypocrisy and like inauthenticity that it's like, no, that has nothing to do with it. And, and Melfi says any, kind of breakthroughs that you've had are completely your own. But when he says it's because of you, that's like actually like much more literal than the like psychological work they've done. It's just like he brought
you introduced her to me.
like you brought me together with Gloria and I'm
Yeah.
happy now. But actually it's completely toxic.
Yeah.
And actually it's going to it seems like it's not going to be good.
Almost.
It seems like
almost a spoiler.
Oh my god, who knows? But
Yeah.
it seems like a toxic relationship to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, and after that too, like Melfi's dilemma where she's talking to her son and talks about how she hates her patients. And then her son says that he needs some expensive books. And she looks at the extra money and has this moral conundrum that I think continues surfacing in the show again and again.
Yeah.
It's like people want to take the moral high ground, but they never do out of convenience and out of the things that they...
Krakauer.
Except for Krakauer. And I guess Melfi to an extent when she doesn't engage with Tony on that level to make him go after the employee of the month.
Right. But she still takes his money this time.
Yeah, she does still take his money, showing that the characters in the show are completely imperfect and that when they're confronted with these moral dilemmas, they typically choose the route of convenience.
Right. Yeah. Who else do you want to talk about? Or do you have anything else on?
Well, like the first scene, just like how bad these presents are and how self-serving
Yeah.
they are. I feel like, like inauthenticity or hypocrisy, or kind of just like things that are completely self-serving are at the center of how a lot of characters behave in this episode.
Well, like Melfi taking the money, right? Like we do see Carmela when she receives the ring, right?
And she knows, like she's smart. She can pick it up. Like she's astute. She even brings up the Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah.
She's like, is there something you need to tell me you didn't get that Mercedes?
Yeah.
Which is like completely hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah. But then she kind of spins it. She's like, so-and-so calls them midlife crisis cars. Maybe it's Rosalie.
No, yeah, she says Kuzmano.
Oh,
Kuzmano.
Jeannie Kuzmano, that's right. So she's kind of hitting it on the head, but like also in some ways not.
But I think she also diverts it. She doesn't want to know.
No, of course not, right? And we see her, she's like hugging Tony and then like looking at the ring, right? Like that kind of stuff does buy Carmela. Even if she does have other thoughts about it, right? Like then she goes out and gets herself the matching earrings.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Just digging the hole deeper. Like she's committed.
Yeah, right? Like now it's a matching set.
Yeah. But yeah, there's just so much
Meadows' gift of buying it on her mom's credit, buying a present on her mom's credit card.
So thoughtful.
Yeah.
She wants a car too, like pushing to get that gift. Which, wow, living in New York City.
Yeah.
What a lucky girl if she gets to go to Columbia and get a car.
Yeah.
Right away.
I don't know where she would.
Maybe I'd want, and also like her behavior, like, oh, like maybe I'd want to like come home
for dinner.
It's like, oh, you can take the 45-minute bus.
Well, and Carmela says that too, right? Like with Tony, you know, like she's like, I think the only reason why Meadow came for my birthday was to see Jackie Jr.
Right, which is probably true.
Which is almost definitely true.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how she brings up the Dave Scavino in a mental health facility in Nevada, going back to the collateral damage. Nevada. Not in Nevada, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Scavino, Nevada. Yeah.
Scavino, Nevada.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, just like these like tiny glimpses that we get that remind us of the collateral damage of Tony's behavior.
Yeah.
And, you know, and seeing that like all the like benefits that come to this family come at a cost. Like it is a zero-sum world, and that people are hurting because of what they have.
Yeah. You know, and the other gift I guess that we get in this episode is the gift of
the Lollipop
Club to Aid.
Yep.
Or I guess like, you know, the gift of the Lollipop Club from the guy who lost all his money in betting to Christopher and Furio apparently.
Yeah.
And so we have her then, you know, back in the music business because we know she has such great taste in bands. I think that Miami Relatives sounded a little bit like Defiler, actually. There was a similar vibe going. It's like kind of like a whiny...
She has a style.
A whiny grunge rock.
Mm-hmm.
It's really beautiful.
I like actually there's a scene there where you can't really hear what anybody's saying.
Yeah.
And you know, like that's great. But then like when she goes to Hesh and you don't really know what they're saying, but you can kind of surmise that she's saying, "What do you think about the band?" And he kind of just like waves his hand around to say like they're okay.
Yeah. I know. I love how you can't hear anything what they're saying either, but you like know what's going on, right? Like Polly passes Chris an envelope. Like it's funny. Yeah. He actually had cotton in his ears.
Mm-hmm.
To block out the sound.
Yeah, I also thought that was an interesting dynamic, just in that, like, kind of like the power dynamic there between Chris and Aid. That like Chris this is like his huge gift, and it is a huge gift, but it's also like completely life changing for Adriana. He's just like she has no agency.
Yeah.
He's just like, here's a club, now you own a club.
Yeah.
And it's like Adriana
this
just
guy
like
works for you.
Yeah, and it's like great. Like now Adriana's life is completely different. Like you would hope that she would have some agency in her life to decide things.
You made her quit her old job at Vesuvio.
Yeah.
Right? And now she has this new job.
Yeah.
It smells like fish and piss.
Yeah.
Those are two things that
fish piss. Yeah.
Aren't really that positive.
Right.
The fish is interesting because of course we see fish and water symbolism with pussy.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also we were finding out when we were reading that the Lollipop Club and what they changed the name to, Crazy Horse, are actually two places that the actor who played Big Pussy owned.
Really weird.
Yeah.
Really strange.
Like a cafe and a club.
Yeah. I keep trying to figure out why she names it Crazy Horse. Because like we do have other horse references in this show. Not a lot yet.
Well, I mean, for me, there is that like weird meta thing. I don't know what's going on, but it seems that like the fact that they are, relating it to those actual places.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'll keep thinking on it.
Yeah. A couple small things.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, just to like go one step further, even on the like inauthenticity, like the very first line that we get from Tony when Carmela's there and saying, "Is anybody home?" is like him singing like "Happy Birthday, Baby, I love you so." Just like the glaring inauthenticity of that.
Yeah.
That he's like you, and again, and like weaponizing these kinds of things. Like
Yeah.
he's weaponizing emotions to say like, I love you so, and he's giving her something expensive to hide what he's doing with somebody else and his feelings for her.
We get a lot of parallel scenes, like with the gift giving with Tony and Gloria and Tony and Carmela.
Yeah.
Even when they're like kissing, like in the first scene with Carmela, they're kissing, and then like Tony sees AJ and kind of stops doing it, right? And then when they're kissing at the zoo, he's kind of like looking around to see if anyone's looking.
Right.
And then there's that group of kids that walks by, and she
Right.
mentions the kids. So there was like, I found like that was a parallel there. He's not really treating either of them the way that people should be treated.
No.
You know?
Yeah.
He's making choices that are, you know, his own choices, but like he's there's some kind of overlap there with like the way that he uses gift giving.
Yeah, definitely.
It's to manipulate.
Definitely.
Really.
There was an interesting thing for me too when Carmela was with Rosalie, and she was saying there was this line of like, you can only push a man so far.
Right.
And then it's like, that's absolutely true. And then there's an edit to Gloria's legs, which for me is interesting because like these two women are kind of like blaming themselves for their role in like breaking up a marriage or like how they could be involved when it's like completely not their fault. Like Tony is responsible for his relationship with Gloria, and he's drawn to her sexuality. It has nothing really to do with them. Like they're not pushing him to that. He's responsible for that.
Oh yeah.
And yet like they're almost blaming themselves for it, or at least like accepting the like reality, this like sad reality that like they would be pushing someone to that when it's like that is not on them at all.
Yeah.
And that's not fair.
Yeah. Just an aside, I love when we see him later at Crazy Horse at Aid's party, just like dancing in some weird clothes.
Right.
Living like, you know, it's like kind of like when he got the earring, you know, to like impress Adriana.
Artie?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Did I?
Right. Yeah.
I'm thinking too far ahead. Yeah. I'm talking about Artie. He like got that earring. Like he's like,
he's so cool.
He's trying to be part of the crew. He's really something.
I also love, on an aside, with Rosalie saying, you know, like after not appreciating with Artie, like not appreciating Artie's like foray into like high gastronomy or like his artistry of like wanting to have, you know, like a more artistic product or whatever, like a higher quality thing. And he brings over the burrata. Yeah. And, you know, she's saying like it tastes like mozzarella with string beans. And like that relationship with food that they have is really interesting. That it's just like what is known, what is comfortable, what is nostalgic. But there's really like no deeper appreciation for what it is or the artistry behind it. Like they don't care. She doesn't give a shit if Artie wants to like, you know, elevate his cuisine. And actually, like, they will shun it because it's not what they want. And it's not what they associate with this cuisine. Yeah. Just, you know.
Yeah. We also get a great line there where Carmela says, Ralphie's a great guy. You should hold on to him.
That is a great line.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I mean, I don't know why Carmela would even, like, let that come out of her mouth. You know, because she doesn't let herself say, like, yeah, I'm really happy about Meadow and Jackie Jr.
Right. I mean,
she
they don't know, though. Things are hidden from them. Like, she doesn't know that Ralphie was whipping around nunchucks in Georgie's face and killing people.
I mean, he's clearly a crazy person, even at regular
But
family
he has another
events.
side. You know, like he was wearing an apron and, you know, teaching Jackie how to make good gravy. Seemed like a good lesson. I was trying to take notes.
We should go make pasta.
Actually, on that note, I think we're going to go make cacio e pepe, so...
Yeah, I think so.
Pretty exciting.
Okay, well...
Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
We'll be back soon with the next episode, maybe even in a couple hours, because
after we eat pasta.
This month is busy, and if we don't double up these days, then there are problems. So we'll be back shortly. Well, very shortly for us, and at our normal time for you.
Yeah, okay.
Looking forward.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.